better daily, where we work hard in our minds, bodies, and our spirits to become 1% better every single day. Download the app and join our Betterment family at betterdaily.life to catch the video version of these podcasts. Here's your host and my dad, Alex Van Houten.
What is up, Betterment family? This is Alex Van Houten in Better Daily Live. Happy Wednesday. It's Wild Wednesday, which means you'll never know what we're up to this morning, and I'm excited about what I'm bringing you. So, first of all, happy 26th day of the Faithful 40 Challenge. We only have 14 more days to go if you count this day done, but it's not really done. So we have 14 and a half days to go until the Faithful 40 Challenge is over, and it's not too late for you to continue on your commitment. If you're new to Better Daily and you've been like, what is this Faithful 40 Challenge? We are logging our mindset, our nutrition, and our exercise publicly for 40 days. And in that practice, getting better in ourselves, and I hope better as a community. And I know this has been a powerful challenge for me, and we have 14 days until the registration for the Better Man Challenge is closed. So I started with 20 spots. We have 12 left. And so the better men who want to jump in with us and dive into becoming a better man through our mind, body, and spirit, I invite you to check that out. I will put a link in the comments below so you can look at all of the curriculum and the modules and what we're going to be up to. Good morning, Robin. Good to see you, man. And that way you can also message me with some questions. If you are interested in the Better Man Challenge, shoot me a message and let me know before you purchase through that link, because I have a discount code for you for being a current Better Daily member. It's going to be awesome. It's an 8-week challenge. We're diving into, like I said, body, mind, and spirit, and we will not be the same man that we went into that challenge when we come out of that challenge. It's going to be awesome. So we've got something special today, and that is I'm sharing with you an interview that I did about a year and a half ago with a client of mine who had been working with me up until that point for about a year as well. And he and I, we go back a bit. His name is Dr. Nick Sotelo, and he holds a PhD in psychology. He works in correctional facilities with troubled youth as a counselor. And so, man, huge heart. He's such a cool guy. He works really hard to help to rehabilitate youth who have just had a rough go of it, man. And because of the rough go of it that they've had, they've made some really poor decisions that could ruin their entire life at a very young age. And so that's the kind of guy he is. And he had gotten to a place in his health and fitness where he looked in the mirror and hated what he saw. He felt like garbage. He knew everything in his body wasn't right, but at the same time, he'd tried diets in the past and different exercise programs and never saw any progress. And so that said, he and I connected and we got results. But it was a really interesting thing because, you know, he's a counselor and I'm a coach. And so I would ask him questions, and sometimes he would answer me in this process of getting results. Sometimes he would answer me in the way that he knew I wanted him to answer, and then he'd go, no, that's not the real answer. So for instance, I remember he and I were talking about alcohol intake, and you'll hear this in the interview, but we were talking about alcohol intake during his process, his journey. You know, he lost lots of inches. He lost lots of pounds. You can hear that in the interview. He started doing things that he didn't expect that he could do when we first started. But early on, I pointed out to him, hey, look, you told me that nutrition is one of those things that you know needs to change. And I'm looking at your food journals and you're drinking about a third of your calories in a day from alcohol. What's up, dude? That's not helping your testosterone. You know it's not helping your energy level. It's certainly not helping this fat loss thing. What's going on there? And he was like, yeah, I know it's a problem, but I don't know if I'm ready to change it or not yet. So if I was a counselor, I'd say, okay, well then what are some things we can change? But I'm a coach, not a counselor. And so what I said to him was, dude, you're going to be fat until we cut out the bourbon. And he goes, okay, I'll cut out the bourbon. And that's the kind of relationship we had through this process. It was a very push-pull kind of thing. And I got the opportunity to interview him after his results and have him tell the audience about what his experience was like and what was going through his head. And we got to have some discussions about some pain points in his journey. And I think the reason I'm sharing this with you is I think it does two things that'll be really helpful. First, it will put you in the mind of somebody who's had to make changes they didn't want to make. Because you might be that person. You might be the person who knows what you need to do, but you don't want to do it. And so he's very open and honest about what that process looked like. And I think you'll find that helpful and meaningful. And then the second thing that I think you'll find helpful and meaningful is we did this interview 6 months into his journey. And, fast forward to now, he has continued in the changes that he made in his nutrition, in his exercise, in his restfulness, and meal preps, and changing his workout around, and doing things that were uncomfortable to him, all those things. And he has continued to get better. He has continued to lose weight. He's continued to improve his performance and enjoy some things with his teenage sons that he couldn't otherwise. And he is a very, very good example of what it means to become 1% better daily. And I think it'll be so helpful for you to hear what his mindset looks like and what kind of changes he had to make, what kind of things he had to confront at the beginning of his journey. So I'm going to share that interview here. I hope you'll check it out. I hope you'll take the time to listen to it and share your feedback, share your thoughts and comments and concerns, because it's very possible that there are some things you need to be doing right now that you're just not doing. And maybe you need a coach to tell you, what the heck, man? Stop doing that. That's not in line with who you want to be. That's not in line with your goals. Quit that. Or maybe you just need to hear a coach tell somebody else to do that. And you can go, all right, if they can do it, I got this thing. Guys, I love you. I think you're awesome. Keep up the good work. And I hope this Wildcard Wednesday is powerful and effective for you. Tomorrow is Word Thursday. I'm really excited about that. But until then, it's just 1%. You got this. What's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten, and I'm joined with my good buddy now because we shared an interview several months ago, Nick Sotelo, but now we've gotten to know each other quite a bit over the last 16 weeks, and that's what we're in to talk about. We've got a different kind of conversation today, don't we?
Absolutely, we do, yeah.
I'm excited about it. So thanks so much for joining me. How are you today, brother?
I'm doing well. It's a blustery Friday fall day here in the West Coast in Oregon. But yeah, I'm doing well. Ready for the weekend.
Nice. I'm ready for us to get over this rain, actually. We've had I don't know if you've seen the Midwest has been hit by freezing rain and stuff. And I kind of escaped some of it, not to make anybody jealous. I was in Cabo on my anniversary trip, and we were like 92 degrees and beautiful. And then we came here and it was shock. It was like 38 degrees. Just like almost snowing, freezing rain, cold. And Kristen's like, this is terrible. We need to go back.
Go back.
We came back
Nice.
for our kids, though. We came back for our kids.
Nice.
Now, we are having a different kind of conversation today, and that is we connected a few months ago. We did an interview, and then you inquired about coaching, as I do health and fitness coaching, to help you with your body composition, to help you with your nutrition and whatnot. And we've been doing that for the last 16 weeks now, which has gone by kind of fast.
Yes.
To say it out loud, it's like, really? It's been that long? But it's been quite the experience. And so I was hoping to be able to share some of that story from both of our perspectives. Me coaching a coach, because you help other people with a lot of things, and you from a client's perspective. The health and fitness coaching thing is a little bit new to you. So are you ready to dive in?
Absolutely.
I wanted to start with kind of framing the journey. What brought you to the point in your life where you're like, you know what, I'm seriously considering getting a health and fitness coach and figuring out this nutrition and exercise thing.
Absolutely. And I'll point out for folks that the problem generally isn't the problem, and the reason generally isn't the reason. Meaning that, what we might say to ourselves or might say to a potential coach as what the problem is and what the reasons why you want to address it, more times than not, it's a good start, but it really isn't there. And so I'll say that's definitely was part of my process and journey. So on the front end, I'm 43 years old now, and I went through a phase in my late 20s where I was in graduate school for the better part of 3 years. I actually experienced dad bod before we called it dad bod. And, thanks to you, Alex, for really kind of explaining, just kind of the genetics that are at play and the biomechanics that are at play when you are bringing children into this world. And I know a lot of that focus, rightfully so, goes on the women. And at the same time, it was because of you, and bringing children in the world also has a biological, genetic impact, hormonal impact on men too. So I can look back on it and be like, oh, yeah. So the combination of bringing my first child into the world and being in graduate school and working full time,
dude,
I came out the other side of that being about 30 pounds overweight.
What a rough combo.
And yeah, absolutely. And this is coming off, an athletic background, pretty athletic guy throughout high school, 3-sport athlete, did a lot of sports, early 20s, and was still that guy even during this phase, late 20s, where I was playing, adult league, men's softball, 4 to 5 nights a week. I was playing pickup basketball still, all this with, 30 extra pounds roughly around my midsection. Right. And so figuratively speaking, it didn't really slow me down at that point in time. So made some changes back then. This is back when Atkins was the rage. It was kind of the peak of, Atkins being all over the place. You basically couldn't go outside your house without tripping over something that was Atkins based, right? And so embraced that and lost, I probably lost 15, 20 pounds, started training in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and, got back to, I would say reasonable shape. I was never, I never had a physique that would be worthy of a magazine or anything like that, even in my athletic days. So that was never kind of my baseline or my goal that I was trying to return to. And then, through my 30s, just kind of drifting again, and getting back to the point to where early 40s, stepping on the scale and being like, oh my gosh, got to do something about that. And so that really started for me 2018, where I started the mental process of being intentional about moving the needle on the scale, so to speak. I was at my peak, I was at 250. And even though Atkins isn't in your face anymore, but all the health alerts are when you're that age and you're pushing now 40 pounds overweight, at least for what I wanted to do. And so that's what really kind of started it for me. And I started doing things on my own, again, trying this or that for, a handful of days or a couple of weeks at a time, and getting frustrated and getting stalled out. On my own, I lost about 12 pounds. Is kind of where I was able to get to and maintain that 12-pound gain, or deficit for about a year, and really kind of plateaued and staled out. I just really couldn't get past that 12-pound mark. And so we had done the interview together, and then you put out the quick start, I think is what you call it, right?
The Jumpstart program.
The Jumpstart, yes. And I thought, what I'm doing isn't getting me there, so I might as well check this out. And I think the Jumpstart was a great way to at least get me to take that first step.
Well, thanks for the story, man. I appreciate that. And that happens to so many guys, is having a background in athletics. You hit those stages in life where things are busy. You may or may not know about all the hormonal stuff that happens after kids and whatnot, but things get really busy. And then you try to do what you did before, and you find that your body's not going to do that, or at least not without paying for it. And then, you add 40 pounds onto even like a 40-yard sprint. That just, your knees, your hips, your ankles, your back, everything's like, hey, dude, stop it. And so a lot of guys, what I love about you is a lot of guys in that state will say, I'm old. I'm just too old for this. I'm going to throw in the towel. You've got two strapping young men under your,
yes.
You're like, that's for them. They do athletic stuff, but you're like, man, I know I could be better than this. Maybe I'm not going to be my 18-year-old athletic self, but I know that I could make progress. And I love that about you, man. I think that speaks volumes to your character. And I also think that speaks a lot to the way that you perceive your life. I mean, you run the upgraded life, and you think, where we are right now doesn't have to be the way everything is all the time. Like, we can progressively improve. So absolutely. I appreciated that about you. And when we first connected in your Jumpstart, I was like, this is where this guy's coming from. Is I know I can be better. I'm willing to try your methods to get there.
Right. And there was a couple other pieces there too, kind of more things that were front and center. 43 years old, my blood pressure, I was re-upping my life insurance. And so, my 20-year term had run out, policy that I had gotten in my 20s, obviously.
Right.
And so I was up for renewal. And so, they send the nurse out and they draw blood and make you pee in a cup and height and weight and measure you and all that kind of stuff. And took my blood pressure. And again, I'm no dummy. And so I watched her, write down the numbers, and I looked at it. I was like, oh,
you're like, oh man.
Of course, she's not allowed to interpret anything. She's just there to, and out the door she goes. And then they sent me my, the results of my blood panel. Again, no interpretation. It's your right for this information. So I went online and started looking it up. And, as far as I could tell, and again, I'm a doctor in my own respects and know how to read statistics, and I can Google good enough, and nothing in there really alarmed me in terms of things that were off in my blood serum and whatnot. But again, I'm not an expert and haven't shown it to anybody at this point in time. But that blood pressure thing really got me. And blood pressure runs, problems with that. Hypertension runs on my side of the family. So I know that isn't a good thing. So that was another thing that kind of really was on my mind about health and what I needed to do something different. And then the last part was, back then when I got this health screen for life insurance renewal, I was also really embracing the identity of being a coach versus being a mental health counselor. That's how I'm trained. I'm trained in the counseling world. I have a PhD in counseling. And I was in this phase where I was pivoting out of that, and I wanted to be, identifying as a coach from here on out, kind of line in the sand. From here on out, I'm a coach. Yes, I know the other world, and I can speak that language, and I can operate in it at a high level, but this is what I'm choosing from here on out. And, I also believe that as a coach, you need to be constantly embarking your own, personal development. And I looked at physical fitness and health as something that's dogged me now for most of my life. And I just kind of said, enough's enough. And if I'm going to be pushing the people that I'm coaching, then I also need to be pushed in an area of my life that I just haven't had a ton of success with. And I spent, like you said, a lot of time just kind of saying, just acquiescing to this. Well, this is how I'm built. And this is kind of my lot in life. And, this is the stage where I just get to accept this part about myself. And I just decided that wasn't going to be it. And I was also, we're both connected to a different mastermind where there is people far older than me, that were in way better shape.
Oh man.
I was exposed to the counter examples, right? And I'm naturally competitive. I'm naturally that person that doesn't want to be outdone. And so I'm seeing all these gents that are high caliber, but they're, 50 plus, 60 plus, some of them into their 70s. And I'm sure they could whip my ass. And so I was like, I don't want to, if they can do it, I can do it.
I'm not too old, but I don't know. I don't know the path.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But, and I appreciate that from you. What, if you don't mind us pausing on this, just because I'm very, very curious, given you were in that shifting mindset between counselor and coach, what would you say is some of the primary differences between those two mindsets or mentalities? Because, you've been in the seat of being coached and you've been in the seat of counselor. So it's a little bit of a different experience for sure.
Absolutely. And I've done a whole podcast episode on coaching versus counseling and done some guest blogs on it too. And because
I'll make sure we drop the link in the show notes then.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't really get a good perspective from people who know both worlds really well, meaning coaches think they know what counselors do, and maybe they've had their own counseling perspective. And then counselors think they know what coaches do. And maybe very seldom do you run into a counselor that's been coached, but you may see the reverse. You'll see counselors that have been counseled for sure, because sometimes that's part of the training process.
Right.
So I'm kind of a rarity in that I know both worlds fairly well. I mean, obviously I'm regarded as an expert and an authority in the counseling world, and I'm still working towards that in the coaching world. So the primary difference I would say is, coaching is based on an outcome, right? Goals are created with your clients, and there's accountability towards those goals because the two of you have agreed that here's the process, here's your goals. And if you're not reaching those goals, there's a layer and degree of accountability that just isn't present in the counseling world. And ethically, there can't be.
Right.
Counseling ethics say that you need to support client autonomy. So if a client comes back from one session to the next and says, Alex, screw your running, I'm not going to do that. And I don't want you to ever talk to me about that again. As a counselor, you kind of have to accept that. You have to accept that that's client autonomy. Now, you can kind of dance around that. Well, I'm sorry that that came across as offensive to you. Originally we talked about our goals and how you wanted to do this, and I thought that running might be there. Well, it's not. Okay, well, maybe we can look at a different way of getting about that. And so counseling is more about helping a person sift through their own experience, and through that process of having somebody really attend to their life experience, cognitively, emotionally, they develop their own insights that allow them to do something different with their life. And the relationship's a big part of that. Coaching is different, right? Coaching is about taking somebody where they're at and helping them raise up to upgrade, or whatever you want to call it, level up, increase their capacity, where counseling is about bringing somebody back to their quote unquote normal capacity.
Yeah, well said. I appreciate that, because that's been my experience as a coach. You actually articulated that super well. And I find, sometimes on my side of the fence, being a coach and not having experience being a counselor, you could joke that sometimes I feel like a counselor, but very few and far between, because the outcomes are very, The outcomes are very robust, very specific. We know what it is that we're aiming for, and each of our sessions is geared toward making sure that we're making progress in that direction. People fall off the wagon sometimes, but or ladders, as we'll talk about. But but the overall goal of the session is to take where you have been and elevate that.
Absolutely.
So what ultimately made you pull the trigger? So we did a Jumpstart week. As I remember it, I remember having a conversation with my wife at the table. I don't discuss names with my wife, but she's my dietitian on staff, so to speak. So we run things by each other pretty regularly. And I remember saying to her, I'm not really sure this client's going to continue with me. Because in some ways there are some changes that I know from a program standpoint he's got to fit into, like he's got to pick up, but at the same time it doesn't feel like he's quite ready to make those changes yet. And as a coach, you can't force somebody to do it. So why ultimately did you pull the trigger? Because we can get into some of those specifics in a second, but I remember in the very beginning there, I was unsure. I usually have a pretty good sense of where people are at, and you were a coin toss for me at that moment.
Again, I was definitely at the realization that I wasn't going to be able to do this on my own, right? Again, I was riding this year plus of losing 12 pounds. And at that point in time, it was all about, losing pounds on the scale and being kind of driven, unfortunately, by the BMI around that. Even though I've known for years, decades, that the BMI for most people, it doesn't really tell you a whole lot, but that's a whole another episode. I'm sure you've already done the BMI episode.
That I have.
Right. But yeah, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to meet my goals that I thought at the time were my goals on my own. And, I liked the Jumpstart that you did, because it gives you a taste and a feel for it. And, and I've talked to Larry about this too, the mutual contact that we have. And, what made me say yes is because the way that you go about the work that you do made me feel like that this wasn't just a program that you were trying to ram people through. It wasn't a money mill, so to speak, right? That you got to know me, you got to know what my barriers were. And, this is the same thing in counseling. What makes it work? Well, it makes it work when you're connected to somebody that you believe actually has your best interest in mind. And that's what made me say yes.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, when I work with people, that Jumpstart week, there are fitness programs in the world where it's like, here's the 8-week program, and you can do that through certain phases of training. Like most people grow muscle the same way if you have a barbell and a squat rack, but you have to be to the point where you care to put on 5 pounds, right. Like in your fitness journey, and not everybody's there, right? But when it comes to having a history of elbow tendonitis, for instance, and having a background in athletics, and not really wanting to go for a jog more often than you need to, that sort of thing. When it comes to that, creating a program is a very individualized process. Right. And so I'm glad that spoke to you, because that's how that Jumpstart thing kind of works. Now, what were some of the fears and obstacles that you had to overcome? Because in the beginning, I remember us having conversations about, well, should I be eating less calories? Like, I don't really understand why we're doing this. And so there were quite a few obstacles in those first couple weeks that I'm sure that were difficult mentally.
Yeah. And I think that whenever somebody is contemplating and making a change in their life for positive reasons, or making the decision to work with a coach, you, Alex, or me, when I'm doing mindset coaching, there's basically two questions that are always at play. And this is, I've learned this, and I teach it, and this is also sales 101, right? It's, will making this change work, and can I do it? Right? Those are always the two questions that are at play. It doesn't matter what the scenario is. I'm going to buy a new minivan. Will this minivan work? Does it work? Does it get the gas mileage that it claims to? Is it as safe as it claims to? And will it work for me? It doesn't matter. New pair of shoes, you know what I mean? You could just go through all the examples.
Right.
So it's the same thing when you're deciding to work, with a coach. And so here's Alex, here's the jumpstart, here's the program, here's 16 weeks. Does this work, and can I do it? Right. And so I think those are the things that I had to wrestle with. I really didn't know if it worked. I mean, other than looking at you, right, and seeing the way that you look physically, right? So I know it works for you. And maybe you had testimonials in there somewhere, but I didn't read them or whatnot. But so that's still a question, like, what does this work? I don't really know. But what I do know is what I'm doing isn't working, right? So it was worth the risk to say yes. And also, I mean, you have high regard in the circle that we are connected to, right? So it's not like there was people going, man, that Alex guy in his program is full of BS. You know what I mean? Like, and so,
right.
So there's that says something too. And then, the bigger part is, can I do it? Right. And I think those were the things that represented some of the hurdles early on, kind of this conversation that you were having with your wife is, am I willing to do the program as you know it to work? And am I willing to adjust my daily routine and my daily expectations for me in order to embrace the program? And so some of that was, I wanted a program, exercise program that I could fit in 20 minutes or less. And I would do it, it doesn't matter, 5, 6, 7 days a week. And that's what I was doing up to this point. Right. And so I wanted that to work. I wanted intermittent fasting to work. Right. And so I was bought into some things that, again, probably helped me get to that 12-pound loss. Right. But they ran its course with me. And so those were some of the hurdles, is how do I expand the amount of time that I'm able to carve out to invest in myself and my health? And am I willing to embrace other methods in terms of building the engine? That's a metaphor that you run with, and that I really appreciate. So
now, given that was your experience, do you have any questions for me about the start of things that you'd like to hear from the perspective of a coach?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know that, one of the things that I let on the front end, this is specific to me, not just coaching in general, is, I said, Alex, excuse me if I sound like a whining little bitch. So I know that there was probably a lot of aspects of Alex going, yep, Nick, you're sounding like a whining little bitch right about now. So, but there was definitely some push and pull, at play, early on in our process.
Yeah, I don't tend to think of that way for my clients. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm not quite as hardcore as your football coach used to be. But one of the things that I've learned in my journey, especially with Ehlers-Danlos, is that somebody's personal emotional response to something and or their desires for things, it really matters in whether or not they're going to be able to create change for the long haul. Because most of us can take whatever whiny part inside we're dealing with, and we can whip that sucker into submission and do something for 2 or 3 weeks. Most of us can do that. As far as doing something that's going to progressively elevate you for the long term, that's a little harder, because if you whip yourself into submission too long, then there's a snap back. It's like you can't be your own tyrant, So like one of the things was running. I remember you were very, very specific in our first conversations. Like, I hate to run. I don't want to run. I would prefer to do anything but run. And I remember bringing to the table for you, because I hear this a lot as a coach, these things that people are like, that's my health and fitness hell. I have a lady I'm working with right now that a year and a half ago, on her health and fitness hell, she said running every day or miles and miles a week, that's my health and fitness hell. I don't want to do that. And now she's run a half marathon.
Oh, nice.
And she's like, I love running. I'm so glad I have this. You know, when I have a really stressful day, I go for a run. And don't worry, we're not trying to run a half marathon, Nick, if that's, unless that's on your bucket list. But that said, as a coach, helping somebody kind of understand what utility this might have for them, to explore whether or not this is a discipline that they can work into their lives without feeling tyrannized by themselves or their coach. And then when it turns out that, you know, a few weeks of practice and it really doesn't suck that bad, actually, like I kind of look forward to it or enjoy it. I remember one of your messages recently said, hey man, having a little less fat on my body makes running a lot more enjoyable, you know, because things aren't wiggling around, you know, like maybe I didn't hate running. I just hated running as I was.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a true thing. So anyway, as a coach, I tend to I think the whining's important. I think you need somebody who's going to listen to you whine, if that's what you're going to do, and to say, all right, I hear you, I see you, we're going to see how this goes. And if you're still whining about it in a week, then we might need to change course. But here's the big picture and why I think this will work well for you. So that's kind of the spirit that I bring to the table.
Absolutely. One of the things that and again, I could have overlooked this in other things that I was going through and other programs that I had embraced, I totally could have overlooked it. But one of the things that you were able to shed some light on, and I don't know if this is the case across the board, but it's definitely my experience that whenever I had embraced a program, I was that guy. You know, I would be restricting my calories and working out like a fiend, and I would step on the scale and actually weigh more than what I did a week ago.
And that hurts.
And that would be the thing that would, you know, pretty much tank me and stall me out, kind of force me into the start, stop, and not really gaining, you know, much momentum or building the engine, you know, like your metaphor. And so that was when I was able to share that with you kind of in a freak out moment, like, what the hell? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you were able to say, oh yeah, that happens. Really? That happens? And then you explained it to me, and I'm like, you know, how did I miss that? And I guess it's not sexy to say, hey, start my program and you can expect in the first 10 days to weigh 5 pounds more than when you started. And I get it. You know what I mean? That's not.
Yes. Bad marketing. You can't do that.
Right. Yet it was my experience, you know, over and over and over again that, you know, and I would come away thinking, and this is where I talked myself, the story that I told myself was, I guess it's just my genes. I work out, I restrict my calories, and I gain more weight.
And they get huge, yeah.
Right. And they've done the research on this in the starvation studies, where they've actually starved people, you know, way down to like 1,000 calories, and they have actually gained weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and so it's hard for people to wrap their head around this. I remember saying to you, and I don't know how much of this you heard, but I remember saying to you 2 things. I'm like, look, man, first, in the first phases of training, when we're growing the metabolic tissue required to burn the fat we want to burn, that requires water, and your fibers are going to fill with water, and everything's going to get, you know, it's got to activate. You've got dormant muscle tissue from back in your athletic days, and it's got to wake up, right? You're going to gain some weight, period, unless you have offset that by, I don't know, clearing your digestive tract or losing a very large amount of fat really fast, which isn't sustainable, right? So I kind of talked to you about that as an investment. The other thing people don't realize, though, and this is really hard. This is hard to wrap your mind around because it varies from person to person. But we are about 70% water. Like our entire body is 70% water. And that can fluctuate from 68 to 75% water. If you had a really salty dinner, you had a couple drinks, maybe you're just retaining water because your workout made you swell up and your butt hurts and you're inflamed, you know. The average person can gain somewhere between 3 and 8 pounds of water weight in a night. Mm-hmm. And that just blows people's minds. They're like, wait, what? And then that, like for somebody who's worked out really well this week, who's eaten really well this week, trying to get some more veggies and stuff, having a 5-pound weight gain overnight when you step on your scale is like, what the hell? What just happened to me? What's going on? And that is hugely discouraging. If you're in your mind, I've worked really hard this week, I've done a good job, I'd like to see the numbers move, and they don't. That was a very important conversation we had about, hey man, you're doing great. I know you're doing the work. I'm looking at your food journal. You're doing a great job. Keep running the play. all this will shed
Right.
and the fat with it. So hang with me.
Absolutely. And it did.
Yeah,
It did. Yeah.
It did. I wasn't just blowing smoke.
No.
But yeah, I did do an episode on, the initial stages of weight loss to help people, but it's funny because that can tend to get buried. It's hard sometimes to catch those 35 minutes and make sense of them.
Absolutely.
So where are you now? Like, what have your results look like? It sounds like you're happy with where we're at and what progress you've made over the last 16 weeks. How has this turned out for you so far?
And that's kind of where I started off, at the beginning, saying that, the problem usually isn't the problem and the reason generally isn't the reason. And, I was so fixated on just dropping pounds on the scale, right? And you kept coaching and preaching body composition, right? That as you're swapping, muscle for fat, that needle may not move like you think it's going to. And it depends on, your starting point anyway. And so I kind of had to embrace that. And so, in my closet, there was at least one pair of jeans that were, a nicer pair of jeans. They cost a little bit more money than I normally spend. And I haven't been able to wear them for like, I don't know, they're probably out of style now, right? I haven't been able to wear them so long that they're now out of style, right? But I was able to wear those fairly soon, probably, week, I can't remember, week 5 or 6 or something like that, maybe 10, I don't know. But I remember looking at those jeans, I'm going to try them on, and I was able to get them on, and not just like get them on. I was able to, like
slip in.
Right. And blew through some of my belts, my old belts that I had, were no longer, they don't work because they're too big.
Boom.
I had a whole slew of dress shirts that, when you put them on and button them up, they scream, get me out of here. And they're stretched, and I don't have, that issue anymore. So just body composition wise, my face, is much slimmer, and people that hadn't seen me for, weeks or months or even years, will make the comments like, whatever you're doing, keep it up. You're looking great. And so, those are things. But then, you alluded to it as well as, the reasons why maybe I didn't like to run, or why maybe somebody doesn't run, is I remember, kind of those first couple jogs that you had me do, and just feeling, the bounce from the dad bod on the front of me, and just not liking that. And then kind of, I don't have that experience anymore. No, I've still got a ways to go in terms of what I'm capable of, right? Kind of leveling up, what I thought I was capable of. I'm capable of a lot more, based on going through your process and whatnot. So this concept of being skinny fat, right? And I think I reached out to you and I said, thank you for not letting me settle for being skinny fat, right? And because I remember there was a phase like, I don't want to be stronger. I could care less about, growing more muscle. I just want to move the needle, right? That's what I thought. But you knew better, right? You're like, this program, if I just left you as a coach being skinny fat, then, what have I done?
I wouldn't feel very good about it.
Right.
Well, like you said, they have done the studies, and you can, let's say all you want to do is drop 10 pounds, and it doesn't matter to you whether or not it's healthy for you. It doesn't matter to you whether or not you've got any good muscle tone, whether or not you have the energy to keep up with your boys, whatever those things look like. You don't care. I just need to drop 10 pounds. Look, if you're listening to the sound of my voice and that's where you are right now, stop eating for about 3 days. You'll drop 10 pounds and then you're good. Like, done. But that's not what people want.
Right.
Because first of all, that sucks, by the way, but it's also not going to stay off. And when you starve your body of the nutrients required, unless you're, doing an intelligent fasting practice, then your body is going to fight that by turning on genes you don't want on and turning off genes that you kind of want to stay on, and adjusting to that. And I hate it from a coaching perspective. I hear this all the time. People have done that. They've dropped the 10 pounds or they've dropped the 20 pounds. And then, a year later, they're wrestling with the same dang 10 pounds because the process is, look, you're an athletic beast. That's what you are. We're going to, grow that athleticism in you, and your body's going to say, dude, we don't need this fat. We just don't. Like, we don't need this because, my man's feeding me all the protein, carbs, and fats I need. Our body's adjusting really well. We're getting rest from the stress, we're growing muscle tissue. And so that body composition focus is huge. And I'm glad that's shifted for you. That one of my questions was going to be like, what's one of the things that has shifted for you? And I hope that sticks with you for a long time in that sense is, hey man, 50s, 60s, 70s, the best thing you can do is tell your body that you need the muscle that you have. And your body will adjust your fat composition based on that, as long as we're not doing anything crazy in the nutrition department. So
Yeah.
what would you say then is the best parts of this program for you? That was one shift. What would you say are the best? We'll get to the worst too, don't worry.
The best part of the program was just helping me, overcome something that has, dogged me for way too much of my life, so it was more kind of a emotional, psychological piece of it, just conquering an area of my life that, I'd all but given up on, for the most part, just kind of, like I said, just settled for, I don't know what the stage beyond dad bod is, but that was definitely there, right? So,
I don't have a word for that.
It might be boss bod. Right?
Boss bod, is that it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and there's people that might listen to this and are going to get mad at me, but in my world, I work for state government, and most of the time, your boss is not the example of physical fitness, right?
That's true.
So maybe it's boss bod, I don't know, but I was definitely there, right? So just that sense of overcoming and conquering an aspect of my life that I really felt like I was going to be a victim to for the rest of my life, that was definitely huge. Again, those are beyond the strength gains. I mean, those are important too, don't get me wrong. And you made a reference to it, people fall off the wagon. I fell off a ladder.
You did.
Yeah, I fell off a ladder about 10 weeks into our program. I was just getting ready to shift into a more intense phase. Maybe I was a couple days into that phase.
Yeah, I think you had gotten about 3 or 4 days into hypertrophy.
Yeah, and I fell off a ladder, and I fell off. It was at least 15 feet up in the air, and I landed on my side, and I didn't break anything. I wasn't admitted. I went and got checked out the next day in urgent care, which means I was able to get up and walk away from it. And I know in my heart of hearts that had I not been engaging in my health and fitness journey, however long it was, 10, 12 weeks, I probably could have died in that. Or I definitely wouldn't have been able to walk away from it like I did. And so, there's things that you discover along the journey that I don't think you could possibly know on the front end of it. And I definitely have a lot of those experiences as well.
Thanks for that. Yeah. And I'm so glad that you walked away from that. And also, like, a lot of people, this is one of the things about coaching. Like, I've joked that I would do what I do for free if I didn't have to put food on the table. But at the same time, the level of commitment that somebody has to put into themselves before they'll take themselves seriously. There are a lot of people who would have fallen off a ladder, and if they walked away from it like that, you were in a lot of pain, man. This took 3.5, maybe 4 weeks to completely recover from, somewhere in there. I mean, you were injured.
In order to resume the program with the same intensity, yes. Yeah. I mean, but I'm still recovering to a certain degree. I'm about 93-95% recovered. There's still a spot in my upper back right here that even right now I can feel it. But yeah, I definitely, there was a solid week where, I wasn't doing much to get out of bed other than to go to the bathroom.
Right. So a lot of people, like that, for many, and I found this in my journey because I'll talk to people about their health histories and stuff, and we get into the nitty gritty, and it's like, I get injured, and then that's like a year and a half of inactivity, like maybe some pain pills in there, maybe some bad habits, maybe even a few limiting beliefs that develop at the time. But for you, that was huge. Like, in my mind, you overcame a lot to get started. You got started and you were in the groove, and then that happened. And that could have been it.
Yep.
Could have been like, look, Alex, I love working with you. This is awesome. Maybe I need to heal up and I'll get reconnected with you at the first of the year. That could have been it. But, you let me talk through that with you, and you let me modify the program a bit to work with, when you could move. Because it was like, hey, man, when you can get out of bed and walking is not too big of a deal, then we can work on that. But you stayed true to the nutrition aspect of things. You stayed true to the rest. You were very cognizant and purposeful about the fact that you were still on this journey.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. People get hurt and things happen, and they think of exercise as like this thing that they do when they feel good. And it's like, no, like, until you die, like, this is a disciplined practice that you can still continue. If I gave up every time I got injured with this joint issue I wouldn't work out, period.
Sure.
But anyway, that being said, I thought you handled that beautifully. So hats off to you.
Right. Yeah.
I was impressed.
And I remember that exchange. I remember you saying something like, so do you want to take a break, or, kind of what's your thoughts on this? And I think my response at that point in time was, goals are goals. This is something that happened, and I'm still committed. It's going to be taken out for, a handful of days before because again, at that point in time, thank my wife a few months or maybe even a month before this, we made the decision to invest in a new bed, right? We're old people, right? We're in our 40s. And so we bought a ghost bed from Costco, and it elevates your feet. And so that was a godsend, because I could just push the button. It would help me get up, and I could actually roll my body out of bed.
Oh, yeah. If you hurt your back, man, and you're like laying there after all night, all the inflammation's pulled back there, it's trying to help the healing process. Trying to sit up from that first thing in the morning is literally the worst.
It was a lot of pain for sure. But like I said, I remember saying, goals are goals. I'll be back, and that was in a large part based on the traction that I had gotten to that point too, right? If this was early on in the program, who knows, where that had been, but I had come far enough that something like that wasn't, again, I wasn't in the ER. I didn't have anything broken. Lost one of my 9 lives for sure that day.
Right.
I think I got 3 or 4 left or something like that by now. And then the connection and the relationship that we had I just been following my Body for Life book that I'm looking at over on the shelf, I probably would have quit.
Yeah
Right.
Body for Life. What about ladder falls? Is there a chapter on that?
Right.
No joke.
Right.
What was the worst part of this whole thing for you? What was like maybe top 1 or 2 things that were just so hard to wrap your head around or get over or still suck?
I would say that the worst parts are going to come through the nature of virtual coaching, right? I mean, nothing's perfect, right? No program is perfect. No coach is perfect. Nothing is perfect. And so I think for me, if I were to say the worst parts was trying to interpret some of the things that were being put out for me in terms of, hey, do this exercise, these reps. And I know I can make things overcomplicated and whatnot, but there was some frustration points, for me in there. Again, the things that I thought were going to be the worst points, as you talked about, as you kind of get in the habit and realize it's not as bad as it is. And one of those was, being dead set that I wasn't going to dedicate, 40 minutes to an hour to working out. That was just ridiculous. I got way too much going on. There's no way that I'm going to be able to do that. And so again, once I did it and got past that, that wasn't the issue anymore. Right. And so, I would say the worst parts of the program just come with the downside, so to speak, of having a virtual coach versus somebody, that's there and is able to kind of, adjust your motion in real time physically or whatever those things might be. But again, those are all things that could have been excuses that I could have, used to pull the ripcord and bail out of this. Right. And so, but in terms of the worst part, again, running, like you said, definitely don't. And I was a baseball player too, right? So when we were playing baseball and watching the people, we call them donut circlers, right? And so I was embracing the all these years of me making fun of donut circlers, right? And so,
the track people.
Right. Yeah.
That's great.
So that was definitely deep seated in who I was and my identity, and having to kind of, accept that. And again, you're research based to it. It's like, I hear that, Nick, and let me, you're a PhD. Let me throw some research in front of your face.
Here's an 18,000 participant study about the effects of running and jogging on your genome.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was like, okay.
Crap, he's got me on that one.
But yeah, I mean, I think, I can't imagine, honestly getting better results, but I imagine that if I was, in your town, in your city, that, probably could have been a little different experience. But for a virtual experience, I'm very happy, super pleased beyond, what I thought I would be. And, so the worst part, this is also COVID too, right? I mean, I started this right on the front end of COVID.
Yeah.
And my area also experienced significant wildfires too. And so there was about 10 days where going outside, was not an option because of the amount of air pollution and smoke, right? Those are all excuses that could have cropped up that I could have pulled the ripcord on. So yeah, I think the worst part was me having to get real with myself, right? I think it's David Goggins that says the most important conversation you'll ever have is the one that you have with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that was definitely
Yeah.
active, for me, throughout these weeks. So.
I love that. And I remember one of your requests was to use your kettlebell.
Right. Yeah.
Like you really love your kettlebell training, and I love kettlebell training too. Don't get me wrong. What's really funny though is in my trainer brain, okay, kettlebells are like super advanced. Usually you don't start a program with any kettlebell exercises because they're just, and I'm not saying you were wrong for liking kettlebells, but it's for most people, the biomechanics behind moving a kettlebell well without injury is very advanced. It's really hard to do that. So I remember, at the beginning, trying to help you walk through the dumbbell exercises that I wanted you to do or the calisthenics based stuff. And you were like, I really don't like these. I want to use my kettlebell. I'm like,
right.
All right. So, so my challenge as a coach was how do we use the kettlebell without creating the elbow tendonitis that you've wrestled with or without pissing off a shoulder or whatever. So it was kind of a fun interchange between the two of us because it challenged me to expand my understanding of an exercise modality that for me is really an advanced modality. It's like, hey man, week 16, week 20, week 40, you crank out some kettlebell stuff and it won't hurt you and it will be great. But for Nick, it was like, hey man, week 5, we're going to use the hell out of some kettlebells, but we're going to use it in a way that's not going to, that's not going to injure my client's body on the journey to making a better version of him. So I appreciate that you expanded my mind in that respect because you were just like, I can't wrap my head around these. I want to use my kettlebell.
Right. And I'm that guy that I think I'm on my 4th set of Olympic barbells of owning them. Right. So literally, I mean, I've had 4 different sets of, full, 300 pounds plus Olympic barbells, bench. I never had a squat rack until now. And through my life, I just kind of, either sold them or gave them away a couple of times. And so again, in the midst of COVID, I'm trying to assemble an Olympic barbell set, and it was not easy, but I was able to cobble together enough to be able to, do, the workouts as you put them out for me. That was also a challenge too, because I'm not a go to the gym guy, not yet. And I don't know if that's necessary, but I just, I'm still not there if that's ever part of the program, Alex, about a go to the gym guy,
But my secret mission is not to make everybody the go to the gym guy. In fact, I have in the course of COVID become I don't want to go to the gym. My garage gym's just fine. Thank you guy. So, so don't worry. I won't be nudging you in that direction anytime soon.
But I remember, kind of taking a picture of my setup and like, look, this is what I have to work with. You know what I mean? You're like, okay, perfect. I see it. All right. So
yeah, exactly. No, that was good. Now, did you have any surprises along the way? Anything that really wow, didn't expect that one.
Surprises were that, and we talked about them already, but, big surprises is the results weren't necessarily what I intended them to be, but that doesn't mean that was a bad thing, right? And so again, improving my body composition, but not necessarily having the scale reflect that I'm any lighter was definitely a surprise. I'm way okay with it now. But on the front end of this, like I said, I was so focused on, dropping pounds, and that's the only thing I care about is dropping those pounds. And so that was a switch. Because again, I didn't have a vision for it. I've never had, and I'm not saying that I'm there now, but I've never had, an enviable physique, right? And again, that's not necessarily the goal, but the fact that my clothes fit better, the fact that I'm doing things with my body that I never thought possible, that was a benefit that wasn't expected or wasn't necessarily what I was after from the front part of it. I do enjoy running, especially I don't like my hard tempo runs still, but I do enjoy the longer runs, and I enjoy that time out there doing it. The rains haven't set in yet, Alex, and so that will be my next challenge. The cold has, and so I've learned, that I probably need to put on some layers.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And a little ear cover, by the way, don't negate that. Like the sweatband over the ears, it really helps. It does a number for you.
Great tip there. So, and the fact that I can incorporate the time that it takes, and it's just a matter of choices, right? So if you're going to spend this amount of time in your health, it comes at a sacrifice, but then you learn how to cut other things out that maybe aren't important. So that way you don't have to sacrifice for the things that are important, which is time with family, and those aspects. You hear a lot of people, I can't have time to go to the gym or work out because it's going to cut into my time with family. Well, I think you can do both. I know that you can do both.
Well said. Well said. And I had a question about sacrifices that I wanted to ask you. You've made a lot of them. You know, you've shifted some things in the morning. You've eaten certain things instead of other things. You know, you've sacrificed time. There were a couple times in our program where I look back and I'm like, how you worked out at 11 p.m. Like, dear God, like, I'm good for nothing after 9. I'm just saying. But so like you made some significant sacrifices through this. Would you say that they've been worth it for you? Are you happy with the sacrifices that you've made?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, I live a busy life. I have a lot of things going on, and, you know, sometimes I have to adjust the workout schedule when life happens, you know? And so, there were more than once where it was like, well, it's, you know, 9 o'clock or it's 10 o'clock. And I know that if I don't do this now, I'm not going to do it tomorrow. And I'm probably not going to be able to do it the day after. Right. And so, you know, my wife or my kids are like, you're going outside to run? Or you going like, yep. You know?
Do you have a flashlight?
Yeah. I would have my headlamp. And there was a couple times where they locked me out of the house because they didn't believe that I was, you know, out there running.
Still out there.
So,
guys, seriously, let me in.
Right? Yeah, seriously, that's what it was.
Sweaty guy needs to go to bed.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and that's not the norm, right? I have to learn how to be better and be more planful. So that isn't the go-to strategy. But, you know, in order to stick with the program, because I also know as a coach too, right? And you and I think probably talked about this on our first interview, is the average person when they engage in a program, doesn't matter what the program is, only execute it to about 60%. And so I know that as a coach, right? And so I'm like, okay, I don't want to be one of those 60% people for Alex.
I gotta beat 60. I gotta beat 60.
Right? And that's important, because otherwise you come away from it and say, well, Alex's program didn't work. Well, is it that Alex's program didn't work, or was I only 60% committed to it? Right. And so I was very cognizant of that. And I'm telling you, that's what made 9:45 workouts kind of, you know, be the choice versus skipping it. So
I love that. That's awesome. So what questions do you have? Because my thoughts next is kind of to transition in your head. What's your way forward compared to where we started? But do you have questions from the coach being coached perspective about the program itself, or how things went?
Yeah. I mean, I know that there was, you know, just out of my curiosity, I know that there was push pull, and, you know, we're both coaches, we're both established in the work that we do. You know, obviously mine's more about mindset and being able to shift your perspective about what you're actually capable of doing versus what your inner story has been telling you up to this point. And so, you know, it wasn't like we were jousting, but I just wondered from your perspective, you know what I mean? Like, when there was push pull, you know, what was going through your mind, or was this typical, you know, everyday client, you know, fitness client, you know, how much did I fit that mold, or how much was I a little bit different animal as far as that goes?
That's such a good question, dude. You crack me up, because there are a couple of times, because I know, like, PhD in psychology, has been working with people for a very long time, has a really good head on your shoulders. I've listened to your podcast. I know you're super thoughtful. And you would ask me some things sometimes, or interject some things sometimes, that I'm like, is this a test? Is he trying to figure out how I'm going to respond to this? Like, you know, because I work with people regularly who have no experience in coaching, no experience in counseling. And so it's kind of like, I mean, you played baseball. It's kind of like there's the curveball, which is like, oh, you didn't see this coming. And then there's the meaty pitch right over the plate, you know, like, so you threw me a few meaty pitches, and I was like, is he just seeing if I can hit a homer with this? Like, I don't know. Yeah. So one of those instances was when kind of that situation where you're like, dude, what the hell? I have gained 7 pounds in the last week. Like, I think I remember the exact verbiage was, your program probably works for other people, but it's not working for me. That's what you said. And it was really funny, because not funny, haha, just ironic, because we're about 2 weeks in. You had made some changes. You were actually pretty happy with some of the progress and stuff on your end. And then all of a sudden it was like, whoa, what the heck, you know? And so I don't like to, that early on in a coaching relationship, I don't like to itemize and rapid fire somebody's nutrition journal and say, look, these are all of the reasons why you're not where you want to be. Because, you know, you can't change everything all at once. That's not good for you. It's not good for the process. But it seemed to me that where you were at, you needed to understand exactly why you were 7 pounds heavier than, so it was itemizing like, look, man, this has a lot of salt in it. Here's a bunch of alcohol. Here's the deal. If you don't want to be 7 pounds heavier than you'd like to be right now, then you need to do this for the next 2 days. You need to drink nothing but water. You definitely need to make sure that we get our cardiovascular exercise in. You need to not eat, I don't know. I can't even remember what it was. I'm not going to throw you under the bus.
Spunkmeyer cookies. Remember I had like three packs of them, you know, something like that.
Water, whoop, just blow up, right? So that was an instance where it was like, I didn't know whether or not you were testing me, and not that you're that kind of guy, but I remember thinking that, like, you're a coach enough to say, the last 48 hours probably weren't the best, and now I'm 7 pounds heavier than I would like to be. Like, what was that about? So anyway, that was one of those instances. But then as we were working together, there was a point in time where you were doing really well, and I hadn't heard from you in like 2 weeks outside of you completing your workouts and sending your food journals and stuff. And in that sense, in that case, I try not to interrupt the process. Like, you're cruising, you're doing a great job. I don't want to give you too much to work with because these changes are working well for you. And I remember thinking, like, what does a coach being coached want when everything's going well? I had no idea. So I'm like, hey man, you're doing a great job. Keep up the good work. How are things? How is your body? And you know, that was my check-in there. Is there anything else I should have done? Because I remember thinking that, like, what does a coach being coached want when everything's going smoothly?
Yeah, and I think it's for me specifically, I think it's a balance, right? Again, I tell myself, I don't need the rah, you're awesome, you know what I mean, type aspect. But then at the same time, there is this piece of me that looks for or wants, you know, recognition.
Yeah.
I think by this point in time, because we kind of had a heart-to-heart come to Jesus at some point too, early on, you know, in the program. Like, look, if you want this to work, this is what I need from you. Right. And if you're not willing to do this, then I don't know, you know, if this is going to work out. I remember having that with you too. So I appreciate. So by this point in time, like, I knew that if I needed something, or if you were looking at what I was submitting to you and something was really off, or, you know, off enough, that you would let me know around that. So I think I was bought into it enough by that point to where I was kind of cruising right along and whatnot. So I think that we had enough of a established relationship there that I probably didn't even realize 2 weeks had gone by. You know what I mean? Like, that's just kind of how in the modes that I get in at some point in time. But because I think that we were further enough along in our relationship that if I needed something, I knew that you'd get back to me. And if you're like, whoa, dude, what are you doing? You know, that you would send that message and figure that out. And, you know, I think that there were some things where, again, you knew that I had an athletic background, but even in high school, I rode my athleticism, like my sheer athleticism and strength, that I wasn't putting time in the weight room. I just wasn't, right? And so when you were like, oh, do this, and I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Like, when you say that, I have no idea what that is, right? And it wasn't me being obstinate. It was like, literally, you know what I mean? Like, you know, right. I would look at the guys that were in the weight room in high school, and I could, you know, mow them over on the football field. And so most of what I got came out of coming to practice and being there. I wasn't the guy that had to put extra work in the weight room. It's just kind of where I was. That's not a good thing, right? I'm not, you know, and I'm definitely not letting my kids get away with that. Right. But some of these things where it probably seemed like basic knowledge, especially for an athlete. And again, this is mid 90s. And again, so I went to a small school, and it's not anything compared to what they're doing now with kids in high school. And you know, the workout room that my son has available at high school rivals any fitness club that you're going to find. You know what I mean? Right. And that wasn't the case when I was coming up. You know what I mean? So
I remember it took me some time to get my head wrapped around that working with you, because it was like you had a very athletic background. So, you know, things like proper form in a bench press without hurting your shoulder, that, you know, it took a little time to get back into that. And then, you know, it's not just you though, brother. There's a lot of guys I've worked with who haven't done a serious training program since they were in their 20s.
Right.
So like, 40s, 50s, whatever you did or whatever you thought you did during that time was doing just fine for you. Yeah. And 40s and 50s, your joints are like, hey, stupid, we don't move like that. Like, don't do that. And you're like, hey man, this exercise isn't working for me. And those few different, cues, I think you said this really well, and I'd love to speak to it. I wish that I could be in every one of my clients' garage helping them work out. That's the ideal.
Right.
That's not the world we live in, but that's the ideal, and so that process or that journey of moving like an athlete in your 40s is a different, it's a different kind of journey. It's a process for sure.
Yeah. And just to one little more illustration about what I had access to in high school, you know what a football sled is, right? I was on the line.
Yes.
Our football sled did not have pads on it.
It's just a big metal,
a big metal piece in the spring, that was there. And that was our sled. Didn't have pads on it. You know what I mean?
So you got some grit out of that, but as far as
absolutely.
Workout form and technique, not so much in the.
Yeah. My mantra, that I heard from my coach was reasons or results. That still goes through my head. Reasons or results.
I love it. Man, those high school coaches really have that like staying power, don't they? I can still hear my track coach yelling at me.
Yep.
Like I can hear it. So I would love to know, how has your understanding of your health and fitness changed since we've started? We spoke about body composition. That's been a really big part for you, but has anything else changed since working with me?
Yeah, I think it's, again, things, and I talk a lot about this in the way that I coach people, right? I mean, there's things that you can know in your head, but then there's things that you believe in your heart and in your soul. And when you're not getting the results that you want in your life, even based on the best knowledge that you have, then there's something going on, down here. And so, again, your metaphor oftentimes that you at least use with me was, we've got to build your engine. That's about that sustainable change, right? Anybody can lose 10 pounds. Tony Robbins talks about how anybody can lose 50 pounds if they want overnight. It's pretty easy. Just cut off your leg, right?
Right.
But that's not going to sustain you over time. Your metaphor of building your engine, you got to build your engine, so that way you're going to create sustainable change. And, the front end of building that engine isn't sexy, right?
No, it just isn't.
But it's necessary. And I've heard that in the past. I've heard, that was a hard thing. You've got to eat to fuel your body. And it's kind of the metaphor that your body is a furnace, and you got to put big heavy logs in it in order to burn more. And I was like, well, whatever, again, that might work for other people. That doesn't work for me. Right. And I think, I would have never gotten to this place with the build your engine, had I not been, working with a coach. It didn't come out of a book that, again, Body for Life preaches that. It's right there. It's been around for at least 30 years, I think. Right. And several, renditions. And so for me, it just reinforced the power of being connected to a coach, and holding me through the ups and downs and the woes of me personally building my engine. And so that was something that I knew it was possible, but I didn't believe it for me. And without actually having skin in the game, working with a coach, I wouldn't have gotten there at all.
And did some of the fitness industry stuff that you've read or heard, or that other people are doing, did some of that play into the disconnect between heart and mind? Because it's been my experience that the sexy fitness programs that are easily marketable will convince you that in 12 minutes a day for 6 days a week, you can have my six-pack too, as long as you're doing the intermittent fasting and taking these magic pills, right? So did part of that play into it? Because
absolutely,
like you said, the front end's not sexy. Like it's like this is how we do it. This is how we increase mitochondrial density. This is how we burn fat as a fuel source. None of it's sexy, but this is how we get there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it definitely plays, because you're bombarded by those messages, right? I mean, Social Dilemma just came out a month or so ago on Netflix, and I'm not totally bought into that in terms of, oh my gosh, we need to be scared of social media. But nonetheless, as soon as you type in fitness in a Google search, well, then you're bombarded by all those programs, Facebook and Instagram and whatnot. I think you posted it up. Somebody did the if you have this type of belly, then you need to do this type of workout, or this type of intermittent fasting. And your question is, do people actually believe this?
Right. Because I know I'm knee deep in the research all the time. That's my job. But then I look at that and I'm like, in my world, a business exists because people buy it. So I see this ad and I'm like, really? Like,
Right.
like that picture is getting people to buy? I don't understand.
And I think for men, it's the same corollary as what women go through in terms of, what they get bombarded with in terms of, what they should look like and how they should feel and how they should dress and whatnot. Seeing, the dude, and that's why I told you to keep your shirt on, seeing the dude with, the 6-pack abs, and the perfect pecs, coming through your news feed, you could look just like me, and I'll teach you how to, do intermittent fasting according to your body type, that type of thing. And again, there might be some truth to it, but that's not the sexy part of it. Right? It's hard to market a program that says something like this, Alex. Hey, you need to build your engine and you're going to have to work for, 3 to 6 weeks. And in that 3 to 6 weeks, it's going to hurt. It's going to suck. And you're not going to look much different than what you started. And you're probably going to be heavier than day one, but buy my program, right?
Right. Yeah. It's not very marketable.
And people know that, and then that's why so many of those things fail, right? Because they get sold on an end result that isn't true to the process, but yet we're so fixated on the end result that we're willing to pay for that out of desperation, right? And if it's quick and easy, that's, I was just talking on a call this morning on a mastermind call that, John Maxwell calls our society right now the microwave society, meaning if you can't put it in the microwave and set it for 3 minutes and have a ready product, then most people just aren't about it anymore. So
yeah, well said. And that's something that hurts as a coach in this space sometimes, is by the time people get to me, they can list off 5 to 10 things that they've done that doesn't work for them for whatever reason, and I hate that there's no shortcut there. I wish that there was a place where you're like, hey, I would like to make some changes to myself. I know it's going to be long term. There's no quick fixes. How do we get there? But unfortunately, you have to feel some pain sometimes on the journey before you're ready for the right salve.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how have your goals changed? I mean, like looking into the future, you said yourself that you see that there's a lot more that you're capable of that you didn't know you were. So how have your goals changed in this process looking into, I know it's really hard to look past anything in the next 3 months, but when we finally get to put 2020 behind us, what's new for you?
I'm definitely more vested in the body composition than I ever was. So I think continuing to swap muscle for fat is definitely way more of a goal, because again, remember on the front end it was about just losing pounds, and I don't want muscle because muscle actually weighs more than fat, so it seems kind of counterintuitive, right? And so that's definitely and again, that for me, it's not vanity. It's me being able to do something that I've never done before, right? And so it's not so I can go to Cabo with Alex and his wife next time around and join him on the beach, but it's also, I've been just finished Jason Redman's book, Overcome, and it's a great book. I don't know, maybe one of my favorites now amongst all the SEAL writers, but he talks about how you've got to lead yourself in order to be able to lead anybody else. And this is, again, an area where I can continue to reach new levels in leading myself so that I can inspire others, inspire my own family, my own kids as number one. Right. And so that's definitely there. Again, dropping, body fat, swapping fat for muscle. I still don't know how many pull-ups I can do right now because I haven't been able to do a whole lot of those. And those inverted rows kick my ass.
They're rough.
So
they'll put some hair on your nipples, that's for sure.
Yeah. And so, being able to do pull-ups is definitely on my list. I've signed up for Spartan races and paid for them and not gone.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And so, so that might be on the list too, doing something running wise. I see a bunch of people that, and again, this isn't me dogging anybody else, but it's just a comparison that I make in my head. I see people complete 5Ks and they're not anywhere near the shape that I am. Right. And so again, before this, I'm like, I'm not going to run a freaking 5K. What's the point of that?
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But, so maybe signing up for some of those, 3Ks, 5Ks, 10Ks, maybe. And I had a dream at one point in time to do an Ironman, to be a triathlete too. And so, and I think I have the book, was it called Big Boy Trials or something like that? And, yeah.
That's awesome.
But all the people, the 200 plus pounds that are, into that. And so, it's embracing those things. It's about accepting challenges, doing hard things. And this is a big, hard thing for me in terms of getting my physical fitness to where it could be. And so I think there's a lot of options out there. I think the big thing though, what does the future hold? Well, it holds more of this, right? It's not a plateau at this point. It's, getting there and then figuring out what the next peak is going to be.
Well said. I appreciate that. Yeah, a lot of people in their health and fitness journey in the beginning can't imagine more doors opening up,
right?
Because you're in a place where it's hard. It feels like you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, right, so to speak, but you're really opening new doors on your path, and you can decide to walk down them or not, which is cool because it gets to be a decision rather than, something you're forced into or something you can't do at all. A healthy man has 1,000 dreams, but a sick man has only one. And and I'm not saying you were sick necessarily, but from a fitness perspective, you only have one dream when you don't have a lot of things going for you in that realm. But as the doors start opening up, you're like, you know what? I could probably walk down any one of these paths and it would be good and it would be worth exploring.
Yeah, absolutely. These don't go out on video yet for you, I don't think, Alex, but if, just the metaphor, John Maxwell talked about how, and I'm holding my hand up and I'm having my other finger as an index finger pointed towards it. And when your hand and your index finger are far away, this is like you being on a boat and this is the horizon. And the further away you are from the big picture, it seems it's out there, it's big, but as soon as you start, making progress towards the big picture actually looks way bigger than what you thought it was, right? So that same idea that when you're away from it, it's big and it's kind of mind-blowing, but as you get closer and closer to it, it's even bigger than what you ever thought possible.
Cool. Dude, I just want to say thank you so much. I appreciate you being coachable. I've worked with a lot of people in my lifetime who are happy to tell other people what to do. Not that that's where you live, but they're happy to tell other people what to do. But when it comes to being coached, that's a whole other skill set altogether, is to be humble enough to let somebody direct you a bit and to hold you accountable and to call you out when you don't do what you say you were going to do or whatever. And to also to be vulnerable enough to talk through your concerns, like I get a lot of things from people in the coaching realm, my clients that I work with, that they wouldn't say to their spouses, because it's just hard to. And so anyway, thank you for the opportunity. Absolutely. It's been an honor to support you in your corner. And is there anything else that we need to cover to make sure that this conversation is high integrity and complete?
This is always a pitch for coaching, right? And, people always, contemplate that. Why hire a coach? Why work with a coach? And, hearing from me as a coach, working, with a coach, but the answer really kind of boils down to this. Number one, if you're not happy with where you're currently at, and if everything that you've done thus far is kind of taking you to where you're at without much change happening in the future, then you ought to consider a coach, because a coach is going to get you there faster. So you're going to spend less time, you're going to make less mistakes, and you're going to use less resources in the long term. Now, on the front end, obviously coaching costs. But when you compare that cost to, again, what would be the cost of me continuing in my 30 plus overweight state, and then pushing into my 50s like that, and then pushing into the 60s like that, because I'm high blood pressure, hypertension, which now by the way, I'm in the normal range blood pressure, so that's right, and that's part of my engine getting to where it's at. What's the cost associated with that? What's the cost of having a diagnosis of diabetes or coronary heart disease or whatever? What's that cost? And I can tell you right now, it pales in comparison to the little amount that coaching is going to cost you on the front end, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the reason why somebody needs to consider bringing coaching into their life, because you're worth the investment. Yes, it's money, but the cost of not coaching and not getting the results that you deserve and capable of far outweigh, whatever penance that coaching is going to cost you on the front end.
Well said. And I'd like to give you an opportunity to help differentiate what it is that you coach versus, because we've spent a lot of time here talking about what I coach. And for many people, they have that, I hope they have the picture of, when the fatty 8-week programs aren't working for you, fad D with 2 Ds, not 2 Ts. When the fatty programs aren't working for you and you're unhappy with your health and fitness, then that's where me and Defining Dad Bod can come in. But for you, Nick, when is it appropriate to connect with somebody who does the sort of coaching that you do?
So What I'm focused on primarily, and this has kind of gone through some evolution and whatnot, but I really have a heart for people that are in that provider role. And so they're in a relationship and they have children, and it could be, male or female that's in that provider role. And they know that they could be doing something better or different, but they can't imagine how to fit something more into their schedule. And so it's providers that want to do better by their partners and better by their kids, but yet feel stuck because of the career that they're in, the time that they have available to them, or just the fear of doing something different and then risking, what if this doesn't work out? And, how am I going to continue to support my family and take a risk at the same time? Mm. And for me, it's about helping people, create a mindset that will get them there, create a mission, meaning what's your focus, what's your priority every single day, and then how do you actually build into your schedule habits that you can do every single day that if you were to execute on them, you can't help but reach your goals. And so sometimes that's helping somebody start a new business. Sometimes it's developing other income streams. Sometimes it's just purely, I miss being there for my kids when they're doing XYZ. And I'm stuck in this job and this career. How do I do something different? Right. That's what I love to do. I love to help people that are in that provider role and to help them create a vision for what that could be like and do it with what they currently have available to them. That's a big part of it. It's oftentimes just a shift in perspective, just a tweak on what they currently have available to them. It's just like me using my carport for my home gym, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. And you say it like it's easy, like it's just a shift, it's just a mindset, but it's something about being able to speak the things that you can't speak or are hard to speak to somebody who has no skin in the game except for your best. Like sometimes Absolutely. Just doing that will change everything in your brain. And then, it kind of helps that you're also a business owner and a career man and a provider with children. And so, people are not just speaking to a blank wall. They're speaking to somebody with perspective who can help them navigate those waters. So thanks for that. I appreciate that. I know how hard it is sometimes to be the provider in the house and not know who you're supposed to turn to when you don't have the answers.
Right. Absolutely.
Well said. Well, man, I feel like this is great. I feel like we could continue talking, but at the same time, I hope this has been very valuable to everybody and that they'll appreciate your journey, appreciate your honesty and speaking through the challenges and mindset changes that happen for you. Do you want to leave anybody with anything?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I offer, just kind of like Alex's Jumpstart, is if you head over to my website, which is www.nicksotelo.com, there's a button at the top. It's red and it says free strategy session. So all you got to do is click the button. You'll get on my calendar. I'll give you 30 minutes of my time. And at the very least, I will help you point to what the next steps are. Hopefully we can work together in a coaching dynamic, but I guarantee not to waste anybody's time. That if you spend that 30 minutes with me, you will leave that time spent on the phone call or through a Zoom with some actionable steps of things that you can do right now to upgrade your life.
Are you saying you do a 30-minute free coaching session to help set the strategy?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's sexy. Yeah. If you're listening to this and you don't do that, like if you feel the least bit stuck and you don't do that, like that's on you, man. Everybody's got 30 minutes.
That's right.
Dude, you rock. I'll make sure that that's in the link that goes out to my audience too, because I think that's very valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, brother, thank you so much for this time. I hope that the listeners got a lot out of it. I'm really excited to see the next steps for you. That's going to be powerful. And I don't know, maybe we will go to Cabo sometime. That could be a lot of fun.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Take care of yourself, brother. And to everybody else, this has been Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. Until next time, guys, kick butt. Take names.
Thank you for joining us for your 1% Better today. Don't forget to subscribe for the podcast. Leave us a raving review to tell others how Better Daily has helped you in your journey. If you want more Better Daily, download our app and join our Betterment family at betterdaily.live. Use code POD to get 25% off your subscription. That's POD, all caps, to save 25% on your subscription. We all have a cross to carry. It's lighter when we do it together. Go to betterdaily.live today.